Masechet Hagigah Daf Yod Tet. Three subjects, all interrelated today. First, is intention required when doing the Tilat Yadayim? Do I have to have in mind that I'm washing my hands in order to purify them, or not? We'll see a proof from some interesting cases of flying waves and fruit that falls into an aqueduct, and then two challenges from our Mishnah. And next topic is intention after dipping in the mikveh. I already went to the mikveh and came out and said, wait, I didn't have any specific intention for what level of tahara I want to have. So can I have intention after I come out? We'll see the 1 foot rule. If 1 foot is still in the mikveh, then that is helpful. And we'll see who else agrees with that 1 foot rule and see if that it applies, not only assuming the water goes down, but also if the water is imagined to be going up. Okay, so that's another interesting kind of theoretical case. And then the last question is, Maaseh Sheni a higher level than Chulin, or is Maaseh Sheni the same as Chulin? Okay, so we begin. Tenora banan, hanotel yadav, nitkaven yadav tehorot. Lo nitkaven yadav temeot. Okay, Braita says if one washes his hands, assuming he does so with a cup, if he has in mind that this will be to purify his hands in order to eat whatever it is, cholin, teruma, kodesh, then his hands are tahor. If not, then his hands are tameh. In other words, if he was just happened to be maybe washing cups, and so he's just washing them, he didn't have in mind to do netilat yadayim in order to eat bread, then his hands are considered tameh. So yes, according to this, you have to have intention. Also, v'chen hamatbil yadav nitkaven yadav tehorot, lo nitkaven yadav temeot. We saw for eating kodashim, it's not enough just to wash your hands. You actually have to immerse your hands in a mikveh. And so if someone immersed his hands, let's say, for example, a person's bathing in the ocean, and so the ocean is an automatic mikveh, he's just going in for bathing, for fun, and then he comes out and he says, oh, I'm going to eat this, this sandwich. So if he had in mind while he was bathing that he's also purifying his hands, then it's okay. But if not, then it's no good. Okay, so according to this Braita, intention is required. However, we have an opposite. Another Braita says, whether you have intention, whether you do not have intention, your hands are fine, right? You just happen to be washing them and then you decided you're going to eat. That's okay. So how are we going to resolve this contradiction? And here it is. Amar Rav Nachman, la kashya kan lecholin, kan lemaaser. When we're talking about cholin, eating regular food, non-sacred food, then you don't have to have intention before that. And all of our food today is cholin. And so therefore, if you happen to wash, you don't have to have intention. However, if it's maaser sheni, right, that the owner is going to bring to Jerusalem and eat there, and certainly anything that's a higher level above that, like teruma, then one must have intention. Okay, so now Rav Nachman resolve the contradiction. Okay, by the way, halacha is that one should have intention when doing the Tilat Yadayim. But the avad, however, it's okay. Okay, so what's our source? And we want to bring a source. How do we know that if I wash my hands and then I decide without intention, and then I eat chulin, that it's okay? My hands are considered tahor. Titnan. We have a Mishnah in Masechet Mikvaot. Gal shenitlash ubo 40 se'ah v'nafal ha'adam v'al kelim tehorin. I'm sitting at the beach and this huge tsunami wave comes and rises up, and a bathtub full of water emerges from the wave, flies in the air, and falls on a person and on his utensils sitting there on the beach, I guess unsuspectingly. The tahor, he says, oh look, now I went to the mikveh. He can go eat his sandwich. Katani adam dumiyad kelim kelim la de la mechaveni afadam de la mechaven. And here it includes both people and vessels. Vessels don't have intention, right? They're not thinking, oh yeah, I want this mikveh to fall on me. And so too, the human being, we can assume that he is not having intention, and this is a proof that even though you don't have intention, you're just sitting there at the beach enjoying your day, and this flying wave comes and crashes on you, that is a good this person is tahor, and that is the proof. All right, so that's proof number one, but we're going to reject it. It says, "Umimai dilma beyoshev misapeh matayit leshagal askinan bechelim dumia da'adam ma'adam debar kavana afkelim demichaven lehu." So how do you know there's no intention? Maybe this person sitting at the beach, he sees that there's big waves, and he says, "You know what? I have to go to the mikveh. I'm going to sit here and wait till a wave crashes upon me, and so that I can be tahor." And so he doesn't want to jump in. He wants to wait. So he does have intention as this wave is falling on him. And so it's permitted. And so he does have intention. And when it says vessels, well, the vessels maybe he has in mind. The vessels don't have a mind, but the owner does. And the owner says, oh, these vessels also are tameh. And when this flying wave comes, it'll fall on me and the vessels, and maybe he does have intention in this case. Okay, so there's no proof. If the person is sitting there expecting, hoping that the wave will crash upon him, then what's the chidush? What do I need the source for? Like, why would anyone think it would be a problem? Well, there is a case where it could be a problem that we need to have this. Because I might have thought that if we permit this case with the flying wave falling upon him, then the person may think that a huge downpour of rain would also be permitted. If it's raining, not buckets, but it's raining bathtubs, and a whole 40 se'ah of rain falls upon a person at once, one might think it's okay. It's actually not okay, because rainwater, in order to be a kosher mikveh, has to be collected. Mikveh, the word mikveh literally means collected and settled in a place. It can't be flowing. If there's a river that is fed by rainwater, that river is no good as a mikveh. Unlike spring water that can be flowing. And so if we permit this flying wave, one may think that rain is okay. So therefore, I might have thought that I should prohibit both. And therefore, this Mishnah Mikvah comes and says, I don't have to worry about that. People won't make that mistake. People know that rainwater is no good and a wave is okay. Or another similar case that one might make a mistake about is regarding the side. So a flying wave from the top of it is permitted because it's falling down upon the person, and then as it falls down, it's connected to the ground, and so it's a grounded water, even though it was flying. Whereas regarding the edge, so what would be wrong with assuming that the edge might be a good mikveh? So Rashi explains that it's talking about a case where, let's say you have a cup or something, and you want it to be kosher, you throw it up into the wave. And that's no good. Even if that wave is flying and has 40 se'ah, it's no good because it's not grounded. And so one might think that would be permitted. And so to avoid that mistake, maybe the rabbis will say you're not allowed to even use the crashing wave, because you might come to think that throwing up something up into the wave is permitted, and therefore the whole thing would be not allowed. And then so we need this Mishnah to come to teach that we don't have to worry that people will make that mistake. Okay, kamash malan de la gazrinan. And so you see, actually, bottom line is we don't have any proof from this Mishnah, because maybe this Mishnah is coming to tell us just this case of falling rain, and maybe the person falling a wave, and maybe the person does have intention. He sees this big wave. He says, I want to become tahor from this wave crashing upon me. And so there's no proof from here that if there's no intention, that it's okay. Last point about this proof. And by the way, how do you know that it's a problem that to use the ark, this would be the case of throwing it up, the Tanya, matbilin berashin ve'en matbilin bechefin, levi she'en matbilin ba'avir. Because we have a braita that you can use the top of the wave that crashes down, that's okay as a mikveh, but you cannot use the sides when you're throwing it up, because you cannot do tevilah in midair. I wonder if another alternative explanation of the edge case is when you're inside here. One might think that, look, you're surrounded by water on all sides. So maybe, right, even just being inside the space surrounded by water would be permitted. And so we have to teach that, no, it's no good because you're actually not touching all the water. So that also is not a good case. But in addition, throwing something up into a wave is also not good mikveh. It has to be grounded. Okay, good. So ela meha. So when instead, I'll show you where we are here. We established Rav Nachman's statement said that intention is not required for washing hands. We tried to bring a proof from flying waves, but that proof was not sufficient. And so we're going to bring a proof now from fruit and aqueduct, and then two challenges from our Mishnah. So let's see this case. Titnan Mishnah in Machshirin that says perot shenaflu letoch amat hamayim. Some fruit fell into an aqueduct. O fashat mi sheyadav temeot untalan yadav tehorot uferot enan bechiyutan. Person didn't want the fruit to fall into the aqueduct, so he sticks his hand in and takes them out. So the reason he's putting his hand in is not because he wants his hand to get wet. He'd rather his hand didn't get wet, but he needs to get the fruit. Nevertheless, his hands are tahor from the water of the aqueduct. And so you see that even though he had no intention, nevertheless, his hands are tahor. So that's actually the proof. But we'll continue and explain the whole rest of the braita. The fruit themselves are not susceptible to tumah. There's a rule that fruit, right, after you pluck it, when it's attached, it cannot become tameh. Even after you pluck it, it cannot become tameh until it gets wet with water that you want to be there, that you want it to get wet, because you want it to be washed, or for whatever reason you want it to get wet. Then it becomes susceptible to tumah. This fruit, although it fell into the aqueduct, you did not want it to fall into the aqueduct. You didn't want it to get wet, and therefore you bring it out, and it's still not susceptible to tumah. However, if the fruit fell into the aqueduct, and I put my hand in the aqueduct to get the fruit and also to wash my hands because I happen to be dirty, so I'm getting a 2-for-1 special. I'm getting my hands washed. I want my hands to be wet. In that case, my hands are tahor. Well, for sure they are, because right, and all the more so. This case, I didn't want my hands to get wet. Here, I do want them to be washed, so my hands will be tahor, and the fruit itself also will now be susceptible to tumah, because since I did want the water on my hands to be there, and that water, I touched the fruit, so that is wanted water. I wanted the fruit to be wet. I wanted that water that's on the fruit that made it wet, and therefore the fruit is susceptible to tum'ah. And so there you go. The proof is from this this section here, that whatever reason I put in my hand into the aqueduct, whether it's just to get the fruit or to actually wash my hands, even if it's not to wash my to be clean, even if it's not for netilat yadayim, my hands are considered tahor, and that's a proof that you don't need intention for netilat yadayim. Okay, now a challenge. First challenge to Rav Nachman's rule. Itiveh Rabba Rav Nachman, his rule that you don't need intention. Hatoveh lachulin v'chuzak lachulin asur lemaaser. Huchzak in lo huchzak la. Our Mishnah stated that someone who goes to the mikveh in order to purify himself for the level of chulin. Our Mishnah didn't have the letter Vav here, and actually the best manuscripts also do not have the letter Vav. So it just reads Huchzak lechulin, which I think reads smoother, meaning as someone who went to the mikveh in order to be, with intention to be pure for chulin, he has a chazakah, he has a presumptive status that he is now pure for chulin. Okay, but you can read it with the Vav also. If he had intention to go mikveh for chulin, and now he has a presumptive status because of that intention for chulin, then he cannot have eat maaser, because maaser sheni it's a higher level, is more susceptible to a higher level of kedusha, therefore more susceptible to tum'ah, and therefore he has to have in mind for maaser if he wants maaser. So here we see that huchzak in, lo huchzak la. If he had intention and got that presumptive status, if he had intention, this is going to be for chulin, then it works. Then he has that presumptive status. But if he doesn't have intention, then he cannot have chulin. So this, according to this, If you don't have intention, it's to wash hands or mikveh, we're assuming it's the same, then it's no good. No, we're going to reinterpret the Mishnah. Even if, the point is, if you didn't have intention, it's okay, you can have chulin. Even if you did have intention for chulin, still you cannot have maaser sheni, because maaser sheni is a higher level. So that's why it included intention to give you the chidush. That intention for chulin still doesn't help for maaser. Itibe taval. Okay, that's one challenge. Challenge two from our Mishnah. Taval velo huchzak. If someone went to the mikveh without any presumptive status, he didn't have intention for anything. He's just going to the mikveh, not thinking why. Or he kind of jumped into the ocean just to bathe. It's like he didn't do tevilah at all, meaning it's absolutely zero. My love, that sounds like it's not literally. It's as if he did not go to the mikveh, which means zero. He's no good, and this proves that if one does not have intention to go to the mikveh or wash hands in order to purify, then it does not work. He is not purified. So this is a pretty serious challenge to Rav Nachman. But Rav Nachman can say, "Lo ki'ilu lo tava lema'aser." No, it just means that it's as if he didn't go to the mikveh at all for the purpose of maaser sheni. So for maaser sheni, then you have to have intention. But it does work on the level of chulin. So according to this reinterpretation, which is somewhat difficult to fit into the words of the Mishnah, it means that if I went into the mikveh just to bathe, I went to the ocean just to bathe, with no intention, it's still permitted to go back and have chulin. It's only as if I didn't do anything regarding maaser sheni. So you have to add a lot of words into the Mishnah in order to make it fit. But okay, it's possible reading. Now, who savar dacheka madchele? Rabbah thought that Rav Nachman was just refuting him and giving this forced interpretation and said, this is impossible. It's not. It can't be that. That's the original meaning of the Mishnah. However, Rabbah then nafak, dak vashkach, he went and checked it out, and he found a baraita. The Tanya tava v'lo huchzak asur lemaser mutar malachulin. And the baraita says if one did tevilah without any intention, he cannot have maaser, but he can have chulin. And that's exactly the way Rav Nachman interpreted the Mishnah. And so there you go. See, sometimes the Mishnah might be very concise with its wording, and there's a braita out there that also from the Tanaim that fills in the explanation. And so this is really quite an essential dialogue to remember because we find this happen often, that there are ukim tot, there are explanations of the Mishnah seem to be the pshat of the Mishnah, and it's always hard to know, right? Is this a forced reinterpretation of the Mishnah because, for whatever reason, the Amoraim need the halacha or need the halacha to go in a different way, or is this actually the original interpretation of the Mishnah, but the Mishnah just really concise and the Baraita fills it in, and so it's hard for us to know. And here we see that even Rabbah wasn't sure which one it is and assumed that this is just a forced interpretation that Rav Nachman's giving because he wants to uphold his law, but it can't be what the Mishnah meant. But sure enough, there's a Baraita that is what it means. And so you see that sometimes it is forced, but sometimes that is the original meaning of the Mishnah, and especially if you can find the Baraita, then that's very helpful. Okay, and now the next section, which is intention after dipping in the mikveh. In other words, someone didn't have any intention when he went to mikveh, and he comes out and he says, "Wait, I had no intention. Oh, now I want to fill in what my intention was, what level of purity I want that dipping to be for." Someone goes to mikveh, he comes out and realizes he didn't have intention, so he can choose whatever he wants, right? He says, you know what? After he comes up, he says, I think I'm going to eat terumah today. So that tevilah was for the level of terumah. That's fine. You can have intention right after you come out of the mikveh, and that's sufficient. Okay. Metibeh, challenge to that. Odehu raglo achat b'mayim muchzak ledavar kal, machzik asmol davar chamur. Allah shuv no machzir. According to this baraita, if one went into the mikveh and came out, but at least 1 foot is still in the water. So he's still connected to the water. And if he had a presumption for a low level of tahara, originally he went into the mikveh just for chulin. And then as he left, when he went into the mikveh, he said, this is going to be for cholin. As he goes out and he still has 1 foot in, he wants to change his mind and says, you know what? I actually want to eat terumah today. And that's okay. He can change his mind as long as 1 foot is still in the mikveh, because his water is still connected. His body is still connected to it. However, once he leaves the mikveh, then he cannot change this status anymore. And so don't we assume that means he cannot change his status at all. And this is a challenge, because Rabbi Elazar says when he goes to the mikveh and leaves, he can assume a status, change his status. And here it says he cannot change his status after he leaves. He has to have 1 foot in. This is a good question, and we answer lo. Allah im lo huchzak machzik, ivim huchzak eno machazik. So if the person, so we can reconcile them. If his foot is still in the mikveh, then even if he presumed a status before he went, he can change the status because his foot is still in. Whereas if he left and his foot, then if he had no status at all, he can take on a status. If he already did presume any status, then he cannot change it. The point is, it's easier to, if you have a blank, if you have a blank on a form, it's easier to fill in the blank, afterwards. Then if you wrote something, you have to erase it and then put something else in, right? So it's harder to change something that's already been set than if it wasn't set at all. So that's the point of the way we can reconcile it. If a person already presumed the status and he says it's going to be for terumah, and then as he's leaving, so you know what, I actually want to have kodesh today. So then he can change his mind as long as it's still in there. But he can't change his mind anymore after he leaves. However, if he had no mind, no intention at all, then even after his foot is out of the mikveh, he can fill in and say, oh, that thing I just did, the tevilah I just did, since I had no intention at all, I'm going to say now, submit that this is for kodesh, and then that's okay. Now, mantana, let's see where we are. We saw a challenge from 1 foot in the mikveh. Now we're going to see who else agrees with this rule that 1 foot, when 1 foot's in, it's considered as if you're still in and connected to the mikveh. And then we'll wonder if this applies upwards. In other words, when the foot is in, we assume that all the water on his body, is the same, is connected to the mikveh downwards. How about upwards? We'll see how the interesting case. Okay, mantana odehu raglo achat b'mayim. Who agrees with this opinion that when 1 foot is in the mikveh, it's as if he's still connected to the water? And Amar Rabbi Pedat, Rabbi Pedat says that Rabbi Yehuda would agree with that. Where do we see it? Ditnan, mikveh shenimdad v'yesh bo 40 sana mechuvanot. Let's say you have a mikveh that has exactly 40, has exact minimum amount of water required, which means if someone goes in and comes out and they take some drops of water on their body, then the mikveh will no longer have the sufficient amount for the next guy. Okay, so v'yardu shenayim v'tablu ze achar zeh. 2 people go to the mikveh and they dunk one right after the other. Harishon tahor v'asheni tameh. The first one's good because when he went in, there was 40 se'ah, but then he left, and so the second one doesn't have enough water. That's Tanakama. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, im hayu raglav shel rishon nogim b'mayim, af hasheni tahor. Rabbi Yehuda says, wait, if the first guy didn't completely leave the mikveh yet, right? He's on his way out, but he still has 1 foot on the step, on the first step down the mikveh, so he's still connected. In that case, all the water on his body is also all connected to his foot and to the water in the mikveh, and still considered to have 40 se'ah, and therefore the second guy who's dunking while the first guy's foot is still in the water on his way out is okay. So there you go. You see, the Rabbi Yehuda says that having 1 foot in the mikveh is considered to be like you're all in the mikveh, like all the water on your body is still in the mikveh. All right, good. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Abu, machloket b'ma'alot derabanan. Regarding this Mishnah, Rav Nachman said that they only disagree that regarding levels of the Rabbanan. Only if it's on the Rabbanan level, then you can consider a foot like he's in it. But in any case where a person has to go to the mikveh because he really needs to, not on the Rabbanan, but on the Oraita level, because he's tameh and he needs to become tahor, in that case, even if Yehuda would agree that we have to be machmir, and the second person will be tameh. You could erase the word af. It doesn't make sense here. Call hasheni tameh. The first guy is okay. They had 40 sa'ah when he went in. And according to this understanding of the baraita, it would agree with what Rabbi Pedat said. Rabbi Pedat says that who is the author, who agrees that 1 foot in is permitted? Only to be Pedat, because Rabbi Pedat was the only one that would say this is permitted, and in the case of the Rabbanan, whereas the rabbis would, the first Tanakama would disagree, and so only to be Pedat holds this. However, there's another interpretation of that Mishnah, another version of Rav Nachman's statement that says machloket mituma letahara. Machlok between these two sages is when you're on a doraita level, need to go from tuma to tahara. Avav b'melot rabbanan, but if it's only on a rabbanan level, divrei kol afesh sheni tahor, then everyone would agree that the second guy whose foot is still in the water, the first guy whose foot is still in the water, we do connect the water on his body to the mikveh, and the second guy is okay. So you see, according to this version, which is more lenient, even Rabbanan would agree that for the purposes of the Rabbanan, at least, the person's foot in the water is considered part of it, and that would be ufeliga to be pedat. And then in that case, we wouldn't need to be pedat. Pedat says only Rabbi Yehuda thinks that the foot in the water is like you're in the water. But according to this version, even the Rabbanan would agree that the foot in the water is in the water. But of course, Rabbi Yehuda in this version says even for on a Deoraita level, it is considered so. Okay. Amar Ula Ula says, one time I asked Rabbi Yochanan the following question. Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says the foot in the water, the foot in the water is like your whole body is in the water, even on the Doraita level. What would he say about a case if someone puts a needle or a knitting needle, a small item that becomes tahor and has to go to the mikveh? What if a person puts it on his head and the first guy puts it on his head, and while he's coming out of the mikveh and his foot is in the water, so he has enough water on his head still, his head's still wet, that this needle will be immersed on his head. Now you're not putting it in the mikveh. Is that sufficient? Because since his foot is in the mikveh and all the water on his body then is as if it's still connected to the mikveh, would that be permitted? Okay, interesting case. What's the theory behind it? Good achit itle Rabbi Yehuda, good asik letle, or dilma good asik nami itle. Does Rabbi Yehuda accept the rule of good means a partition, achit means lowering? This means if you have a partition up high, and it's a 10 tefachim high, and even if it doesn't reach the floor, we extend it downwards. We, as if in our minds we consider as if it extends downwards. The other opposite rule is good asik, which is when you have a low wall that starts from the ground and goes up 10 tefachim, we assume that it extends upwards up to heaven. Good asik is a rule that we apply to sukkah. So you don't need a full wall in a sukkah. You just need a wall that's 10 tefachim, and then the rest could be open. And we imagine as if the wall extends up. Okay, so in this case, regarding the water, does Rabbi Yehuda assume good achit? For sure he does, because he says the water on one's body is considered as if it all goes down. Like if you'd wait there long enough, the water would go down and go into the mikveh. And so therefore, we extend the water on his body down in the mikveh, and so the mikveh still has 40 sa'at and good for the second guy. Yeah, that he says. Would he also apply it the other way? That the water in the mikveh is as if we extend it up onto his head, and the needle on his head will become tahor. Do we say that? Or maybe he says only downwards. Do we say, he said, what did he say? Only downwards but not upwards? Or would he also say upwards and the needle is permitted? That's the question. And we answer, Amar le'tinituha, shalosh gemamiyot benachal. We actually have a different case, but it's effectively similar. When you have 3 holes in on a slope, an upper one, a lower one, a middle one. The upper hole and lower hole can hold only 20 se'ah, not enough for a mikveh. But the middle one can hold 40. So for sure you could use the middle one as mikveh, but the upper and lower you couldn't. But now, and all of a sudden, this downpour comes, and the rain comes and is connecting all 3 of them. And so now they're like one body of water. So Rabbi Yehuda said that he heard that Rabbi Meir said that one can go to the mikveh in the upper one. So here we see that the mikveh, the kosher mikveh, is the middle one that has 40 se'ah. And because it's connected through water, I can extend that mikveh water upwards, and I can go into the upper one, even though it's only 20 se'ah, but I can still dip in there. You're going to have to squeeze to fit into 20 se'ah, but it's permitted. And so according to this, we do say not only good achit, but also good asik. We extend the water in the middle one upwards. And so according to this, the needle on the guy's head who has 1 foot in the mikveh would be tahor. All right, that's our answer. But we're going to see an opposite answer. There's another braita that also quotes Rabbi Yehuda, but in this version he says, he's quoting Rabbi Meir because that's only Rabbi Meir's opinion. Yes, says yes, the water extends upwards, but Rabbi Yehuda himself thinks that the bottom one that has 20, that would be permitted because we'll extend the middle downwards, but we do not extend the water in the middle hole upwards. And so you see, according to this version of the Baraita, according to the Yehuda, it would not extend upwards, and therefore the needle on his head would not be tahor. Amale itanya tanya, and he responded, well, I guess if that's a Baraita, then that's the Baraita. So according to this Baraita, it would not extend upwards, only downwards. All right, and now the last topic. Maaseh Sheni, is it in fact a higher level than Chulin, or is it considered the same as Chulin? Well, our Mishnah said, someone went to the mikveh having in mind that I'm going to eat Chulin. So he has a Chulin level, and he cannot have Maaseh Sheni. So according to this, it seems that Maaseh Sheni is a higher level of Kedusha than Chulin, is a separate level. Right? It's lower than Teruma, but higher than Chulin. So Mani Matnitin, who is the author of our Mishnah? Must be Rabbanan the Shani lehu ben Chulin Maaser. Yesterday we saw machloket between Rabbanan and Rabbi Meir, and Rabbanan made a distinction between the two. Rabbi Meir did not. So therefore, our Mishnah must be Rabbanan. There is a distinction between Chulin and Maaser. But that's true from the beginning of our Mishnah. The end of our Mishnah says, Bigdei am haaretz midrash la perushin. Bigdei perushin midrash leochle teruma. In that case, said that the clothing of an am haaretz, even if I don't know for sure that a zav or zava or nida sat on the clothing, I presume that it's tameh midrash, which is a high level of tumah for perushin. Perushin are more careful and they eat chulin betahara. So they have to assume that the clothing of Amaris who's not careful is tameh. So that's a level of chulin. Then the next clause jumps straight to teruma. The clothing of perushin who are careful for chulin is considered tameh for kohanim who eat teruma. And so you see, there's nothing here about maaseh sheni. So since it skips from chulin straight to teruma, we can assume that maaseh sheni here is the same as chulin. And so this would be Rabbi Meir. So now with one Mishnah, we have 2 different opinions. Atan Rabbi Meir, De'amar chulin maaser kadadanin, who this clause is like Rabbi Meir who says chulin maaser are the same level. Resha Rabbanan v'sefa Rabbi Meir. Does it make sense that the beginning of the Mishnah would be Rabbanan, and the end of the Mishnah would be to be Meir. Two different authors of Mishnah. And we say, in Resha Rabbanan, the Sefer Rabbi Meir. Yes, maybe that's in fact the case. It could be, right? So it's important to see that although we have a Mishnayot that go, back to back, it could be that they actually come from different sources, and they're just put back to back because they're a similar subject. Okay, Rav Acha, lastly, Bar Adam matni la besefa chamesh ma'alot umukila kula kerabanan. Okay, that's what we just said is true for our version of the Mishnah. But Rav Acha Bar Ada has another version of the Mishnah, and in his version, in the Sefa, in the end of the Mishnah, actually lists 5 different levels, and in that case, the whole thing could be Rabbanan. In other words, here in this case, he'll have an added level that says the clothing of Perushin are considered midrash for those who eat Maaser Sheni, and the clothing of Maaser Sheni is considered midrash for those who eat Terumah. So since he adds a level here, Maaser Sheni, then we can read the entire Mishnah like Rabbanan, who say that Maaser Sheni, because it's slightly more holy than Chulin, does have a new level, and one would have to go to the Mikveh and wash hands specifically for Chulin and have intention for Chulin for Maaser Sheni above that of Chulin. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.